Start recording. Alright, gonna go ahead and start recording. Let's see. Sam's here. Alright. We'll see if Adam eventually joins, and maybe Joy's busy. We'll see what happens. Alright. So, welcome everyone. Nice watch.
Thank you. I wish it was mine. But I'm not that rich.
So, let's see. What has happened since the last meeting? Well, we're basically done with classes. Pretty soon. Joey had the idea of throwing an end of semester party. So that'll probably be the next thing that we end up doing. Not exactly sure of the date though, because I may or may not be out of state. So probably be in the next after, it'll probably be 2 weeks from today, but that's still TBD. So watch the announcements and we'll see what we're probably gonna have. Joey found what'd you call it? Secret Hitler online, so we could have like a virtual board game party, which would be sweet. Maybe some Smash Brothers and stuff.
Shut up, Sam.
Sam. All right. So what else we got going on? A couple more a couple of future topics that we're gonna have talks on coming up. Maybe Adam will give us a control systems basics talk. We'll see what happens. Probably not. Joey's gonna do a 3D printing talk eventually related to COVID-19, and then Sam is gonna give a talk on Spring. So we'll learn how to create REST endpoints for web development. If you're like me and have no idea what that means, it basically has to do with passing data via the URL. So I think it's basically a you don't need PHP, right, Sam? Because PHP is trash.
I would agree with that.
It's almost as bad as
I heard that.
So, and then he might do some follow-up talks on stuff like Angular. We'll see what happens. Because React is trash. Oh, hi, Joey.
Hello.
Joey!
Howdy.
So, let's see what else is happening. So that's cool. In other news, I think we're eventually going to have the summer ACM elections. That'll be a thing that has to happen pretty soon. We've got a lot of cool talks. Brendan's the winner. And then, so I guess we'll send out a survey for that. If anybody wants to run, that'd be great. It'd be a good idea to change up the leadership. It'll be a good way to, get people experience with, the different positions in ACM, and it'll help ACM continue on, longer than we're around at the college.
Vote Luke for all 3 positions.
All four.
4 positions.
All 4 positions. Luke Langle.
Who's currently running?
Nobody.
Are you gonna run?
I would be willing to run again, yeah. I'm not sure as what. Either as chair or co-chair again, it's what I would run for. So I don't know if... I don't think Brian will run for chair again. So we'll definitely need another person to run for either chair or co-chair, and then Luke, Luke might run for secretariat again. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
We'll run for Secretary of Defense.
There you go. And then you had mentioned adding some different positions to the leadership, right, Joey?
You can do whatever you want, buddy.
Oh, well, it was just an idea.
Wait, so whoever's the chair can do whatever they want?
I mean, technically, I think there's a rule where the if the majority of other board members agree to, they can vote somebody out of their position.
Oh man.
So as of right now, I cannot be voted out of my position, no matter what.
I think you only count as one. You only count as one board member on the ACM site because you're just under as treasurer.
Okay. Whatever. I'll just stay in my fort.
You can do what you want, buddy.
So,
Are you gonna run again, Joey?
yeah, you could run, Joey.
Yeah. I mean,
I think the idea that Joey wants is he wants ACM to continue after he's left college, right?
Yeah.
So it's a good idea, for other people to step up. And I've learned a lot so far this semester, and I like I had said before in the general is I'd like ACM to continue. So I will try to support that however I best fit into this. So, getting into the tech news, I guess. I have a couple of cool things. This one talks about they some researchers at a university, I'm not sure what, North Carolina State. They came up with this fabric that is breathable, and it's kind of cool. This one that you're looking at, it uses it's got buttons that you can press, and so what they did was they hooked this up to a computer and they were able to play Tetris. So it's kind of cool. The way that they described making it was kind of funny. It sounded like a recipe to me. So I kind of assembled the steps if you want to build your own breathable electronics fabric. So step 1 is get some stretchable polymer film with an even distribution of holes, and then you dip the film into a solution that contains silver nanowires.
oh, I just have that stuff laying around.
I
all the
know,
time.
right? And then you bake the film, you heat press it to seal the nanowires in place. And then you just enjoy your newly created electronic fabric. You can optionally scale up production and become a millionaire. That's one of the claims they made, is that it's easy to scale up production, and so it'll be a good product. There is a cool YouTube video right here. Shows them playing Tetris with it. It's kind of cool. I'll drop all the links in the Discord for anyone who's interested.
Does it have a hold button?
Does it have a hold button?
Yeah.
What does a hold button do? Like in
It allows you to
Tetris?
swap out your. It allows you to swap out your present piece for the last held piece.
I don't know. I don't think so, but it's pretty cool. So
It is very cool.
that's pretty sweet, yeah. So that was that article. I'll drop that link later. This one's kind of on a similar tone, I guess. They developed this electronic skin that basically has sensors in it to detect things like heart rate and temperature. But it doesn't require batteries. So they went into this thinking that they didn't want you to have like a battery strapped to your chest like Tony Stark. So they went for the much more glamorous approach of making it just run off of your sweat. So,
Oh, that's not uncomfortable at all.
no.
That's awesome.
It is pretty crazy. It apparently can produce enough power to power a Bluetooth like device that's built into it that'll allow you to
How would
communicate
it run
to
off
things.
my sweat?
The article goes into more detail, but the summary, I guess, is it absorbs high levels of chemical lactate that your sweat contains, and it combines it with oxygen, which produces water and pyruvate, and then they operate biofuel cells that generate electricity. That's like a 10,000 foot view. I don't really understand how it works still, but basically a chemical reaction that powers stuff, the sensors and the Bluetooth device. It's pretty weird and cool. Then there's in other news, there's this guy. Kind of a cool thing for anybody who's got some anxiety with public speaking. There's a new app for the Amazon Alexa. These researchers basically, they made a tutor that helps users engage in what they call cognitive restructuring exercises. I mean, personally, I love to have my cognitive abilities recalibrated every other week, but so what it does is it basically makes Alexa more of a device that you can have a conversation with, and so you kind of get practice, having those conversations, and I guess it just gets you practice with that, and then they've tested it on a bunch of people, and they end up being more comfortable speaking in public. So it's kind of a cool thing for anybody.
How long until I can outsource my therapist to Amazon?
Now's the time.
Might take a while.
And so the last one I was going to mention was I read this one and it kind of sounded amusing. Florida man to fly drugs to retirement area. That's the summary. So they're basically going to use drones to fly prescriptions into retirement areas where different residents live, elderly residents, and they're going to do this so that there's less of a risk that they'll get coronavirus. So the prescriptions will be flown into the area from a shipping facility, and then they'll be dropped at a central location, and then a nondescript human person will ferry them by way of unmarked golf cart to each home in the area. So apparently it's kind of cool. They've been doing more and more tests with drone deliveries. UPS has, Alphabet Inc., which is Google's parent company, has also been doing it in Virginia. So it's kind of cool. So I'll drop those I'll drop those in the Discord later. But I think that's everything I've got. Yeah. I was gonna suggest. Yeah. No, that was good. That was everything I was gonna talk about. You want to take it away, Brendan?
Sure. So I am going to talk about programming languages, and there's a few steps in that process. So we're going to just talk about processing them, being able to verify that they're correct, the syntax is correct, and organizing the output into something that you can actually use. So the first step, I'll just try to find a random picture of just to have as a reference. Images, that's the best format of code.
Brendan's talking.
That is not C++.
Did someone say images rendered as code?
Sure. Or just
Are we
code
learning
rendered.
Pyatt today?
No. So every time you make a program, we'll just use this basic thing. I'll try to. Every time you make a program, every program has symbols and different characteristics. It has its syntax. As you know, Python does tabs instead of organizing things with braces. So every language has some differences, and you need to be able to process that and easily organize the language so that you can not have to worry about being distracted by having to do everything yourself. So there are things that are available that allow you to parse it. So we're going to talk about some of those concepts. So first of all, you need to understand the basics of the steps in parsing it. So the first one is called the Lexer. And what the Lexer does is it allows you to parse the program into tokens. So, for example, This is a pound sign and then a number, a series of letters. This would be an include token, and it would have to specify in the language that this exists. IO stream, so it would also have to specify that you can have some sort of left, whatever, less than symbol, text, and a right than symbol, and this would be considered a token right here. Using namespace standard. Those would each need to be token. Using would be a token, namespace would be a token, but a STD would be a generic token because you can have any namespace, but namespace is actually a specific token because it's unique to C++. You're not allowed to use the word namespace. Am I still streaming? It says, how'd the stream go?
Yeah, I still see you stream.
You're
Okay,
still streaming,
good.
and I'm still hearing you. I'm still seeing you. Don't worry.
Awesome. Because I was like, how'd the stream go? What are you talking about? I'm not done. But because of that, you need to be able to say, hey, I need something lowercase using. That is a token. Namespace, namespace. That is a token. If it's spelled at all differently, it can't be recognized. But STD, this should be able to be absolutely any series of characters, of letters. And according to the syntax, this doesn't have to be a valid name. We could have blah in here. And according to the syntax would be correct, but blah would end up being undefined. We'll figure that out later down the line. So as you can see, we have to be able to parse this into something called tokens. So the way we do that is with a Lexer. And the Lexer is going to start, okay, well, it depends. If your C++ does things weird, and you'll notice this, C++ normally, I like the language that we're going to use to parse is going to start at the first character and go to the last. C++, the way that it analyzes it, it actually starts at the last character and works backwards. That is why when you are working on something, let's say you forget the semicolon. If you forget that semicolon, where does it error out? The majority of the time, you're going to find out that it will say, hey, was expecting a semicolon before double. Well, that's because it's working backwards. So there's some weird things with the way that it reports errors. So we are going to be using something called ANTLR, ANTLR, and it will work forwards. It makes much more sense to me. But yeah, so you start at the first character, and you'll have a list of rules. I will bring my language up real quick.
So the reason that it puts the error before double rather than after height is that it's saying, hey, wait, hold up a second. I thought there was supposed to be like something else here. Like
Yep.
This doesn't look like your normal C++ syntax. You can't have multiple type declarations in the same statement.
Exactly.
Sorry, the same expression.
And it does that in normal. They do it whether they go first to last or last to first, but where it detects it is different because of one's going backwards, one's going forwards. So this, not sure why. Why am I using a user defined? There we go. I defined my own language in Notepad++ so that it would color things pretty, since it doesn't understand G4 files.
Understand what now?
G4 files. ANTLR uses something called G4. It's their own thing.
So is this basically just a huge pile of redefinition?
Not redefinition. Why'd that go away? This is So this right here is the Lexer. So what you're going to notice is each of these is a regex. Does anyone not know what a regex is? Because I'll explain. I'm assuming I need to explain that a little bit.
The regular
Yes.
expression.
Also, could you zoom in a little? If possible. Perfect.
Yeah, I forgot what that was.
So yes, a regular expression. If you take theory of comp, you're going to sadly learn a lot about them, and not in a fun way.
We did?
Wait, you took
Regex
theory
are
of comp?
terrible.
I just took theory of comp.
You never covered regular expressions.
Well, like, I probably didn't. Just keep going.
Teaching it.
Did you cover what are they called?
Grammars?
We talked about like languages and grammars, but I don't remember
Context-free languages?
specifically. Yeah.
Okay, well, regexes should have been before that, so maybe it was just a while ago and you forgot. They're very, very simple. It's basically a state machine turned into text. A normal state machine. That's what this is.
Okay.
It's a way of representing it. Okay, maybe it wasn't called regular expression, but I thought it was. Because sometimes different categories use the terms differently. So
Like it
maybe
has
they
a
didn't
completely
call-
different name, but it lacks only one feature compared to its predecessor.
I think it's the same feature. It's just I'm wondering if they call it something different. I can't remember. It's been a few years since I took that class. But it was so much fun. I loved it. Even though it was hearing, it still ended up being fun. I wish it wasn't hearing, but that's besides the point. So don't worry about fragment right now. I'll get to that. It's a way of making things easier for you. Also, some of my things are pretty bad, and they should be not this. But let's just look at something simple. So this in ANTLR Lexers, the first letter of a Lexer rule has to be capitalized. So I just made everything capitalized. So this rule is the right paren or close paren, close brace. Why did I call it bracket? It's not a bracket. Whatever. Apparently I don't know what a brace is. Semicolon. These are simple rules. This is easy enough. And by the way, you can do this. That is also a rule. And this would have to so if it found the text comma AOEU, this rule would be satisfied.
AU.
But then we get to some more complicated rules. So one step up from that, we'll just do white space. So in this regex, the parenthesis means we're going to group a set of items in an OR.
AU.
And so that set of items is going to be the space, carriage return, tab, and new line. So if any one of these occurs, that is going to be considered white space.
Smallest side, please. I'm sorry.
Of course.
What is the functional difference between the carriage return and new line, like in the modern C++ language?
It's not specified in C++. That's specified on a system level. I believe Windows requires both the carriage return and new line, whereas Unix only requires the new line, if I remember correctly.
Okay,
could be wrong about that.
So that's why some systems and programs automatically replace CRLF with CR or with LF or vice versa.
Exactly.
And that's what I've heard creates problems with Huffman in other instances of nonlinear.
Yeah.
It can, yeah.
Yeah, if you're like me, don't do it.
I'm guessing that happened to you, Joey.
Yeah, it did. Keep going.
Sorry.
That. So the return statement, if you want to return something in a function, you need a return. Well, okay, return. Notice all lowercase. If you wanted it to be uppercase or lowercase, you would have to do something. If you wanted to have any
your
letter,
audio cut out for a second.
Oh, sorry. If you wanted to have uppercase or lowercase, you'd have to do something like this. If you wanted every single letter to be uppercase or lowercase, that would be a little more complicated. Then you would have to So notice this is an OR.
Are you still talking?
No, sorry. So I have push to talk. So if I'm typing, I can't talk.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Does your keyboard not have N key rollover?
It does, but my push to talk might be on my mouse.
Just grow an 11th finger.
Well,
Snails do it all the time. It's not
I'd
that
also need to
hard.
grow another hand because I use 2 hands on the keyboard.
Just grow it out of your elbow.
Set the mouse on the floor, use it as a pedal.
I don't like this. Let's end this conversation
Keep
before I get
accidentally
the worst
pressing the
ideas.
Windows button and moving it.
If you want to go backwards because you accidentally Windows tab, you can Shift Windows tab. What is the name of the OS key?
The Windows key, clearly. No matter
Even
what
if
OS
you're
you're on.
Well,
Wait,
does
does it
actually
magically change pictures when you switch OS? It's the Windows key.
Well,
and if you have a penguin, then it's called the Tux key. I don't know.
That's like saying that if I have the freaking Space Cadet keyboard, that the Super key and the Hyper key automatically remain the Super and Hyper keys,
Exactly.
even if they function like. Anyway, let's get back
I'm
to the
just having
topic.
fun
I'm
with you.
sorry.
I have no clue.
I know.
But hopefully you see kind of how this works. If we wanted the return to be uppercase or lowercase, we say, well, lowercase or uppercase, and then lowercase or uppercase, and these are rules next to each other are automatically concatenated. So it assumes R, then E, then blah. So one of these R's, then one of these E's, blah, blah, blah. So that's how that works.
So basically, if they're right next to each other, it's basically a massive AND.
A massive AND? What?
Like a massive AND.
Oh, yes, massive AND, yes. But the way that this gets processed is from start to finish. And what it will do is it will look at the first character. So in this case, there's a hashtag, because it's definitely called a hashtag. And so it will it will look through all of these rules, not the fragments. Fragments are copied and pasted into the rules. They just make it easier to make rules. They're basically like a preprocessor. But the hashtag, it looks through all your rules and it goes, hey, in my case, I don't have a single one of these rules that supports this. So it would error out. But in the case of the C++ language, it would find a rule that begins with $, and it would actually more than likely find multiple rules because there's hashtag include, there's hashtag define, there's a bunch of these. So it would find multiple rules and it would start and just look at all those rules and go, okay, well, these are the set of rules that are still valid right now. What's the next one? Okay, that might get rid of the hashtag define. So that one's no longer valid because there's an I and define starts with a D. And so it would be able to eliminate that one. And so what it moves along until it either finds only one valid key, one valid rule, or until it breaks all of the rules, maybe none of the rules completed, in which case it would error, or it finds multiple rules that are all valid. If that occurs, it will always take the rule that's longer and the one that's first if they're the same size. So those are some weird edge cases that you don't really need to worry about, but it
Does
has
C++
ways of...
have those cases? Like assuming it was a language made in this way.
I'm not sure when you'd need to worry about. I don't think C++ does, but C++ is an extremely complicated language.
Isn't C++ in a weird sense the only recursive programming language?
It's definitely not the only.
Well, I mean, like, previous versions of it are compiled using itself, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that's what you meant. I believe there's others that are done like that too. I'm sure C is, but
Technically,
I don't
it's assembly doing it. So that's my bad.
know. No, there's only. Oh yes, C++. Get ready. Oh, I don't want to know how big this is. Oh, that's disgusting. And by the way, this is the simplest part of the language.
It looks like it. It looks like a bunch of very, very, very simple rules.
Okay, but if you had looked at the C example, come on, small thing. Notice how much smaller this is. Done.
All the lines are teeny tiny. Most of them. No, when I say teeny tiny, I mean like you could read them on a 40-character monitor. Most of them.
But, and yes, I'm sure they meant to do that. The point is that C++ is an extremely complicated language, so I don't know if there's any conditions where that happens. Let me bring back up the thing. Okay. So in that case, it would find include. It parses through it. If there's only one rule that defines include, then it'd stop right there. Then it gets a space. Well, it would actually have to be told that space is something. And so the way most languages do that is it just says white space can be any of these characters and just ignore them. Sometimes you do need to do stuff with it, but most programming languages, except for things like Python, ignore all white space. So that's cool. And in the rule, they would have to say that this is a space because you can't just have namespace and then std.
Python is a good language made by good people for good purposes.
Sure.
Sorry, abject sarcasm at work.
Okay. But as you can see, it's going to go through these, and when it gets to the end of include, it will go here, and then it will find the white space rule, and then it will go here, and it'll find the whatever this would be called rule, and then it'll get the new line, and that's the white space rule, and then the using rule, and white space, namespace, space, white space, what this would be called like a name or text rule, and then semicolon. So these are all just individual rules that represent the code and different parts of the code. They cannot, under any circumstances, be recursive. You cannot have a rule that contains another rule. So class is a rule. Box is a rule. Left brace is a rule. The rule doesn't care about matching braces. It looks at left, it looks at right, and it says, okay, I got a left, I got a right. That's all it cares about. So does everyone kind of understand how the Lexer works with regex?
A little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now that you bring it up, the bracketing issue seems a little weird because how would it keep track of, say, if a right brace is not preceded by a starting left brace that isn't already associated with something else?
Okay, so that gets into something called the parser.
Were you already about to lead into that, or?
Yep, and I'm glad you said that. So, mine are ugly, and I'm sorry in advance.
That's the ugliest parser I've ever seen. And I've seen so many parsers. Just
Oh yes, I'm sure.
Boy. That's
So-
never gonna fit on a punch card.
Are ANTLR files white space blind?
Thankfully, yes, and you're supposed to do this.
That
I'm
actually
guessing.
looks
I'm
pretty
guessing you
nice.
wanted to. I'm
Yeah.
guessing you didn't do that because you wanted to make a point of doing that.
No, I didn't do it because I'm a lazy ass.
Oh my goodness.
You're a bad person, and I don't like you
And
anymore.
I was gonna wait till it was done and then clean it up because it's difficult to work on it while you're learning, and you have to like undo all the new lines because you have to change something in the middle and the way that it's nested and whatnot. And I just like I can see it. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry for you guys. I hadn't. Yeah, I'm
That's what I
sorry.
always say about my Thomas projects. I'll come back and clean it up later.
I'm so thoroughly
That I never do.
disappointed.
What did you say, John?
I'm so thoroughly disappointed.
I'm sure. But something that you might want to notice is that the difference is these. Notice how I said the Lexer, the regular expressions, cannot be recursive. It just recognizes tokens, one after the other after the other. Guess what? This is the parser. It can be recursive. So imagine regex, but on top of regex, you have recursion. Yes, welcome to parsers. So, what is a program? That's what our high level thing, highest level is a program. Well, a program can be one or more, plus means one or more. White space, which white space can be nothing, or it can have a white space character, or it can be a multi-line comment, or it can be a comment in my language. Comments are considered white space. So you can put comments anywhere that white space can be. And then some sort of expression, and then optionally have white space on the end. And then it has to, your program ends with an end of file.
So basically, it's just a string of declaration expressions delineated by white space.
Exactly. And then an end of file to end it. If this was not included and you received end of file, the parser would error out saying, I saw something I didn't recognize. Or I have a token that wasn't recognized by the parser. So you do need that.
For just a little question. So the plus is it's like the asterisk in the theory of comp stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
And that means 0 or more times, right?
Asterisks means 0 or more. Plus means 1 or more.
And so a empty file with an end of file character is a valid program.
Invalid, because I need 1 or more.
Oh, it's
If it
1
was
or more.
Asterisk is 0.
Oh.
Plus is 1 or more.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
But if it was an asterisk, then a simple end of file would be enough.
Exactly. But I assume that a file should contain something, so I say it should contain at least one thing. So I put a plus. You can change that if you want your programming language to be able, like Python. Python doesn't require a main. Therefore, nothing is a valid Python file. I, however, do not consider that valid. So that's kind of up to you.
And when you say I, do you mean like you yourself or the language that you're currently making?
The language that I'm making, I don't want it to accept nothing. So I made it not accept nothing. Nothing is not valid according to me.
Nothing is not valid, Brendan.
Yes, I'm great at words. But notice something. We now have a recursive definition because this rule calls another rule. So the declaration expression is somewhere right here. And the declaration expression is either an import statement or a variable declaration or a function declaration or some sort of structure declaration. Now, I'm not going to cover structures because currently those aren't supported in my language because I'm still doing some simple stuff. But I do have function defined. So the function declaration, well, it's a function heading plus white space plus a function body. Perfect. That works. Then we have, we need to find our function heading. So a function heading is type name, which so you might think like void one space. And white space one means at a minimum of one white space character, because some things don't require any, but some do. So that's how I made the difference. White space is 0 or more. White space 1 is 1 or more. And then your function name, so void foo space, maybe. Notice the not the one. And then your open paren, more white space if necessary. Optionally, you can have some set of function parameters and then close paren. And that's your function heading. Then your function body is open bracket, white space, function expression, white space, semicolon. So function expressions end with semicolon. I am eventually going to change this because certain things, think of an if statement. An if statement doesn't require a semicolon, but my language currently doesn't support if statements, so I don't have to worry about that yet.
An unconditional programming language. That can't be bad at all.
Yeah. But it's a very simple right now. I'm just trying to understand the concepts. And then a return statement, white space, close bracket. So you can see how you can build this language hierarchically. Well, what is a program? Well, a program is a set of things. And what is a function? Well, a function is a heading and a body, and you can kind of part it out into these individual things. But eventually, you need to get down. So if in a class declaration, it's a class header, white space, body, and the header has a class name, and so class space my class, and a class name is just a label. So notice how label here is capitalized. So class name refers eventually to the Lexer, because the Lexer went through our program and it parsed all these into tokens. Notice how the parser doesn't actually look at text. It just looks at tokens and it goes, well, I want an include token. I want a using token. I want a comment token.
Rock.
And it then uses tokens. So we no longer have to care about anything. This is a number. This is a name. It sees it as that. It doesn't have to look at, this is a PACKAGE, whatever, and that happens to be a name. It just cares, oh, that's a name. So because of that, the last ones, it has to terminate. The rules all have to eventually terminate in something that refers to the Lexer. Because if it eventually defines, let's say, another rule, and that rule doesn't have a Lexer rule, it wouldn't know what it is, because it can only look at the tokens given to it. Because this is a multi-step thing. So the first step is to use the Lexer to parse it into tokens, and then the parser will take those tokens on a second pass, and it takes those tokens and it sees, okay, well, let's organize these into a program. So that's how languages are actually formed. This is how you create something. This is the grammar that decides what is valid and how do we organize it. So first of all, are there any questions about any of this? I'm sure it's a bit some of the syntax is a bit weird, and I don't.
What does the question mark mean?
Okay, awesome. I don't remember question marks in regular expressions, but from taking the course, but in regular expressions outside of courses, the question mark means, well, kind of what you might think it would mean. Does this need to be here? So, variable declaration. Well, you have a variable name, and then you can, do we need a valued? So let's say we say int a. Well, you can also say equals 0, right? Int a equals 0. Well, do you have to? No. Just saying int a works. Put the semicolon after the int a. So this says maybe this will exist, maybe it won't. So it's saying it's valid if this happens. It's still valid if that happens, but that's not necessary. And then it needs this. So this is a maybe. This might occur. It's valid if it does. This is not what you think it is. This is more complicated, and I don't really want to get into it. This is specifying that the asterisk should not be a greedy delimiter.
Oh my. Okay. Yeah. That's
Yeah. I'm
okay.
not covering it.
That makes sense, though.
But
Thank
in
you.
this, it's just this can occur or it can't. Both are valid.
Okay.
I have a question.
Of course.
What about those inside the variable declaration? What if you don't put the white spaces? It's like, are those white spaces needed? Can't just have variable name equals with no white space?
So the way C++ would do it is in right here.
Hello?
It's typing.
I think
Yeah, I had some technical problems.
I forget
That
what
Kyle?
the actual. Hello.
Hello.
I forget what the actual command to ANTLR is, but it says whenever you see white space, discard it. So we might be able to see that if I go to the grammar of C, and at the bottom they'll define and white space. Yeah, skip.
Okay.
So all white space characters, which apparently the only thing that's white space is a tab. What? Okay, apparently new lines and carriage returns. Oh, it looks like space or tab is skipped. But notice how that would change how this works. So if you had, in your example of variable declaration, variable name, or where's one that doesn't have the, I guess that works, function declaration. So if you have your function heading, let's say void, and then space, that would have gotten ignored in the Lexer. It discards that token, so this doesn't see anything between there. It just sees function heading, function body. But notice you can't say void foo without a space, because the Lexer would recognize that as just one string because it doesn't have a space. So when it's trying to recognize names, it would see, oh, well, a name is some number of characters and then another thing, like a space or a whatever. So void foo without spaces doesn't work still, which is good because you don't want it to. You need the space, but it gets rid of it, so your rule doesn't have to even know that the space ever existed. It just has to know there's a function heading and a function body. I am experimenting with some things. I wanted to, so as you noticed, I put comments. I consider comments to be white space, which allows me to, and because I don't skip white space, that allows me to process the comments, because I want the compiler to actually look at the comments. Most times the compiler actually never receives the comments. The Lexer will, I forget what the verb of lexing is, but it will throw it away. The parser never even gets it. It doesn't know comments exist. I want it to know the comments exist because I want to do things with it. I don't want it to change the code, but I do want it to be able to maybe output documentation based on comments or something like that.
So is your language white space blind, or it's dependent on white spaces?
It's white space blind, yes, just like C++. I do have to specify that there needs to be some white space, but how much white space doesn't matter. So, yeah, like to void comment foo. Yeah, that would be valid.
Okay.
But yeah, I would like to show you my grammar, but the problem is that I ended up realizing I created 2 versions because I was debugging some problems. And then some of the fixes are in one and some of the fixes are in another. So I still have to merge the changes together because I didn't notice that until it was too late. But yeah, so I won't show you my language, but I would like us to create our own language. And it looks like we might be running out of time. So we might have to do this another time, but I don't know if I'd be able to have another lecture sometime in the coming months. I don't know what any plans are or what's possible. But I thought of a project that would be relatively simple. It's not going to be a real project. It's just going to be a test project. And I think it'd be simple enough that we could actually make our own language relatively simply. So my idea was create a text-based language, just like normal, but it's to define homework problems. So let's say you're trying, I'll just bring up Notepad. Let's say you're trying to create a problem of okay, I'm not going to draw the whole triangle because that's going to take too long. But imagine that you have some problem that has a question, some variables, maybe a picture. How would you define a language so that you could generate homework problems and give it, instead of saying like a generic x equals 4, y equals 6, say maybe and being able to specify the problem, the way to generate a problem, have certain information about the problem, and then be able to calculate things both in the generation of the problem and the solution of the problem so that it could print out a teacher's guide to the solution. So this is what I want to be able to create.
Sorry, my mic's been off apparently.
Oh, okay.
So the 1 through 200 and 5 through 32 are randomly assigned, I'm guessing, within that range?
It'd be a range. So what I want us to do is create, very simple, this isn't going to actually be used. We could maybe use it to do this example. It wouldn't be something that would be very robust, sadly. I don't think I'm bright enough to be able to do something that'd be useful yet. But once I made my own language completely from start to finish, so what I want to be able to do is just write a grammar that would recognize this. So I don't know how long. I don't think we have enough time today. So
Nah, this will be quick. Um,
Night coding session might be a good idea. Doing something like that, it'd be kind of.
That sounds wonderful.
okay, yeah, I'd be up for anything. You guys just tell me. I get off at work at 3 because I work with Germany, and so I shift my hours earlier to work better with their time zone. But yeah, so this is my goal. I do have some initial thoughts on how multiple ways to do things, but I want you guys to create it. So I'm kind of gonna let you define the syntax, and I can give you ideas, but I want you guys to be able to figure out how to make this language, and then I'll show you how we would do that in here. And I really like the way that I laid out my project thing, because I can literally give you the Git repo, and you can compile the language because it's all self-contained. It literally has the JDK, the Java Development Kit, embedded into the repo, so that it can compile the Java code that the parser generates, and so that you can test your code. But how about I just show you a super simple example that I came up with for this, and we just experiment with it for the next 5 minutes, and I'll call it a day, and then we can work on this on, as you said, like some Friday night coding session or something.
Sounds completely fine to me.
Okay, sweet. Okay, so a lot of these files are not. Don't worry about the name. The reason it's called B# is because I copied this repository. So it's, as you can tell, not in the B# repository. But I didn't rename it because then I'd have to redo all my scripts that compile it. So I just didn't bother. I would do that when we actually get to this. But notice something. It's very simple. So the program can contain any amount. Notice how this one's any, not one or more, of text or code. So text is just text, and code is code. Seems pretty simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what is text? Text, notice how I said, remember when I said that things can't be recursive?
So any number of text elements.
Yeah, so how does text contain a text element? That sounds recursive, like a recursive definition. Well, it's a fragment. That means that this will get copied and pasted into the code right there. So it doesn't actually mean it's recursive. It's a way to make this easier to write, so you don't have regex that's going off the side of the screen for 3,000 characters. So it's not. It's copied and pasted before it's run.
so it's kind of like the pound define in C and C++.
Exactly, except for it's recursive in
Okay.
the
Yeah.
copying. So if text element contained another fragment, that one would get copied to text element would get copied. So like you can, but once it's copied, it does all the copying and then it runs the rules. It doesn't run the rules until all the copying's done. So it's still not considered recursive as a Lexer. But this is what I decided. So something very simple. Text element, any number of text elements. A text element can be something that's not a brace or a backslash, because that's going to be the way we define code. Code starts with a backslash, can be any character besides the ending brace, and then has a ending brace.
And if it's code, is it just normal C++, or is it something else?
That's not something I've decided yet. So I don't have that defined here.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. But yes, so the text element can be anything but the start of a code block or a backslash. Because let's say that you want the start of a code block in your text of your homework problem. Well, you'd be able to say backslash brace as valid. Or what if you want a backslash in your code? Well, you can backslash a backslash and you escaped the backslash. That's very common in strings and stuff.
So tilde square braces is supposed to mean like the complement of the set described by its contents?
Exactly. So anything but these things. And then, but we also still want to include this specific conditions of these characters. Do you see how that's, we couldn't put that all in one line, all in one little block, because the not complements these characters. So we can have anything but those, but if it's those, it can occur, but in this specific sequence.
Okay.
Dang it.
I may be losing something. Does the backslash mean anything in particular, or is it just...
If you want a backslash in your homework problem, it needs to be valid. So normally backslash, according to this, is not allowed. But I want it to be allowed if you escape it. So your homework problem could contain backslashes, but they would have to be preceded by another backslash.
Oh, okay.
To tell you that, actually, I want this to actually be a backslash. And then you can also include braces, but again, you have to say, I actually want a brace because I'm going to escape it. So yeah, that's what I was doing there. And we can show you. Yes, valid. It runs batch scripts that run things that run things. So there's a lot of different things getting run. But it compiled this code successfully. And produced Java files and then compiled all the Java files using the JDK. That's why I liked this thing. You don't have to do any of this. The script just goes, I know you want it, so I'm just going to do it for you.
This sounds like a nightmare.
All of these files, all the class files were generated automatically using ANTLR. So, is this in the... let me run that again on a clear thing so you can see what's actually existing. So these are the ones that exist. So remember how we had code, program, and text? Well, it made class files for us. Be sure parser. Oh yeah. So in the parser, it had these. So as you'll notice, it created a, that's a compiled class file. .java, I think is what we need to look at. Apparently class files, class.java. There we go. So it generated this Java code automatically. Isn't that cool? Oh, and what's this? That's the state machine. Because Joey, you took theory of comp. Regular expressions are state machines represented in text so that humans can understand them better. This is a serialized state machine to recognize all of the different values in our regular expressions. Isn't that cool?
Oh, Jesus.
There's a giant state machine.
That's a lot.
And that's
Lot to
supposed to be a
take in.
regex?
Those are all of the regexes somehow squashed together and encoded.
Okay.
Don't worry about understanding it. That's not your job.
So when it's like \22 or \16, is that very literally just like
This is
ASCII
Java?
16?
I think so, yes.
Well, it's
This is
also
Java, so I think that's
isn't
how-
it serialized? So like, there's like a layer of
Abstraction.
serialization on this, so you can't actually read this.
Oh yeah, it's completely
Okay.
custom to ANTLR, and there's no way to know what this means unless you looked into how ANTLR did it.
Okay.
But yeah, I just thought it was cool that it generates this state machine as code and all of this Java code. Oh, guess what? I also told it to generate C++ code, and it did that.
Wait, it can do either?
It can do Java, C++, Python, JavaScript. There's a list of languages that it supports as output. And you just tell it, hey, I want this language. And it goes, okay.
That's not bad. And then I can just take the contents of the C++ output file and just have it as like a dependency directory, but named obviously like language or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly.
But specifically, obviously like language or whatever.
Yeah. So I say -d language CPP. This one outputs to the CPP file folder. I don't fully understand this. It doesn't use this, but if I don't put this here, it will only output to the output folder and it won't output to the CPP folder. I have to put a folder that doesn't exist for it to output to the previous one that does exist. So I called it "this isn't used" because it's not. I don't know why.
Why not just comment it out if it's not used? Oh, wait,
Because if I
it's a
commented
folder.
it out, it wouldn't work. If I comment this out, it'll output to the output folder, not the CPP folder. It's the weirdest thing.
But you can call a subdirectory and it's completely fine.
And then it goes to the parent directory of the subdirectory instead of the actual subdirectory. I have no clue. It spent so long trying to figure out why directories weren't working, and I was just like, it works. Nothing else works. Okay.
I don't think I want to make an operating system anymore.
It's just this program, I think.
Or at least as much.
So I tell it to also output to Java. Notice how I didn't specify D language? That's because it defaults to Java. So I have it do Java first so that and then I compile the Java with the Java compiler that's in this project folder. And then I have it output C++, but I don't have it compile that. That's because I haven't worked on that quite yet, but I'm working on it. But the reason that I output to both is because I want C++, but the Java has something really neat. So there's this thing called grun. So once we have our program compiled in Java, it's compiled in Java, not C++, we can then run So that command that I just typed, I don't know if you got, can you see it?
Barely, but I can. Do. Do you have one of those fancy little 4K screens?
Nope, it's 1080p.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. That explains why I can read it.
Yeah. But grun, I don't know why it's called grun, well, they tell you to name it grun, but whatever. Grun is a program in ANTLR. They create this tool that allows you to test your code, test your program. So I tell it, hey, I want you to run my And you don't see our programming language in here. Like where does it mention B#? Because it thinks it's named B#. You don't see that here because it's in the bat file. So it exists. Don't worry about it. It references the B#.g4, but I don't do that in this line because I didn't care. I don't want to take that every time. So I had it do it in the bat file. But then I say, hey, I want you to parse the program rule. Our program rule is everything. And when you do that, I want you to output the results in GUI format. So let's do it. Okay, we now are running that command. We're in that command. We have to type something that's valid in the language that I specified.
AU, 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 AU.
You then press Control Z. I'm not sure why that's the escape sequence, but you press Control Z and enter, and it will process that for you. Hey, looky here. This is not great resolution, and I can't change it.
Oh, hey, it actually explains to you the parse tree to make sure that you understand what your language is doing.
Exactly. We have a program. It contains text, code, my wonderful code, more
It's a
text,
D tree.
the new line, more code, some more wonderful code, text, and then it ends. I forgot to include the end of file. It looks like it doesn't care for some reason. Also, this isn't a very complex one, but you can expand this and expand this and expand this down. This is called an abstract syntax tree. You have a program that contains code, and the leaves of this tree have to be Lexer tokens. This was a Lexer token of code. This was a Lexer token of text. So that is how you parse it, and this just tells you, hey, I recognized it, and this is how I organized it. Then the next step would be to have something that goes through this tree and browses through the whole thing and then creates and does stuff with your program. So I don't know if maybe I could talk in another lecture, because that next step is actually like a whole nother lecture, because that's where you get to decide, like, am I making a compiled language? Am I making a simulated language, scripting language of some sort? My language is actually going to be both. I'm going to start with a scripting language because I think that'll be easier, and then I'll make a compiled language. But yeah, so I think it's cool. You get to do all this stuff. So yeah. Any questions? Thank you.
I have one. I might just be, a Luddite who doesn't really like coding as much as everybody here probably does. But what's really the benefit of making your own programming language when there are a lot of ones out there? On top of that, there's a lot of standards.
Yes. So one of the best is that you understand programming languages more. You understand how to code, why certain things exist, why, because you study it a lot. So it's helped me understand C++ more. And two, I don't like any language that exists perfectly, so I get to create one that is exactly what I want, and probably nothing like what anyone else wants, but that's fine. It's also a way to experiment with different techniques. So I wanted to see a new type of pointer. I wanted to create a new type of pointer. I eventually discovered after posting on Reddit that this pointer already exists in a programming language called Rust, and the term is called borrowed pointers.
But what? Excuse me?
It's a way to automatically manage pointers so that you don't need a garbage collector and you don't need to specify new and delete.
So when you say, so basically, I get to have I get to have C++'s variety of I have to manually allocate and deallocate it, but then I can also have the variety that's automatically garbage collected. Is that what I'm hearing?
No,
my
it's the
convenience?
best of both worlds and the worst of neither. So garbage collecting requires a whole nother process that just garbage collects stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas C++ thankfully does not have that, but you now have to manually delete all your pointers. In Rust, now Rust has many different pointers. It actually has garbage collection if you want it. But let's say you're not using the garbage collector. If you're using a borrowed pointer, what it does is you create an item and you say, I want this item to be a borrowed pointer. Then when you if you pass that pointer to another variable, that variable now owns that pointer.
Oh, as in, like, if I try to set another variable equal to it, does it refer to the same actual thing in memory, or does it refer to a copy of it?
I dropped a link in the general if you if it's easier to just use that.
Sorry, I guess this isn't the time to field this sort of question. I haven't exactly done that sort of thing before, but I am kind of rusty.
I think they're called unique pointers, actually, it looks like. But let's say that you have this is the reason I put this instead of asterisk is I want to indicate that this is not a normal pointer. It's a special pointer. Okay, in Rust, this is invalid. In C++, if these were normal pointers, they'd be completely valid, would it not? B and C would both point to the same thing that A points, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in Rust, this is called a borrowed pointer. If I'm thinking of the right thing, maybe that's unique pointer. I think it's unique pointer, sorry, from what I can tell. So what a unique pointer does is, and also this is not the syntax in Rust. I'm just trying to, I know a lot of people know C++, so I'm trying to use similar syntax. If you have the pointer B equals A, it doesn't copy the pointer. It owns the pointer. So Rust has this great idea of ownership. And what that means is A no longer owns that pointer. A is invalid right here, right after this. So when C tries to assign itself to A, it's like it throws a compile time warning that you just tried to use something. Notice how you never get a program that has an invalid address if you're using unique pointers. Also, why don't we need to call delete in Rust on a unique pointer? Well, because of the fact that it knows exactly who owns a pointer at a given point in time. Don't know why there's 8 spaces for a tab, but I'll deal with it.
Oh, that's just Notepad by default.
Yeah.
Don't you have Notepad ++?
Yeah, sometimes I just find Notepad easier for super simple stuff.
Fair.
But notice how after this last brace, B was valid. After this brace, it now needs to be garbage collected. So it automatically generates code to delete B at the end of this code segment. You don't need to do it. Ever. If you're using a unique pointer. So to answer your question, not Shane, you get, with more experience in programming languages, no one in the world is going to use my programming language. I'll accept that. Well, I'd love if you would give me some feedback, but it's
No,
not
what I
going to
mean
be
is,
a
like,
widely
you will.
used. Yeah.
Just simply on principle.
Yeah. Hopefully it's good enough too.
If the project gets bigger, you might have to just like do it in a more conventional language, and I'm sure it'll be more accepted.
Something like that, yeah. But you end up learning so many new things and being able to think about languages in a new way, and you understand how to program better.
So you're saying it's a purely academic exercise on your part?
Yep.
Say purely.
If you are going to actually do this with an attempt to make a new language, there's actually a new for a language called D-lang. It's relatively new, and by relatively new, I mean like 20 years old. And it was created by a developer who made C and C++ compilers his entire life, basically. That was his job.
Was it the inventor?
No. Just someone who worked for many different companies making C and C++ compilers. So he understood how they worked, and then he created his own called D-lang, and he tried to make it extremely modern and use a bunch of different things. It's garbage collected and not, but unlike Rust, it's either you use like C++ style syntax or you use garbage collection. There's no in between where like Rust has some, it's not Rust like things where it does things for you. It's either you use pointers or you use auto garbage collection. So it's a little different, but because that's the type of thing that if you actually wanted to do it, it would kind of need to be your job. It kind of have to be something as big as that.
Just because it just requires that level of actual dedication that you'd have to do it like it's your job.
Compilers are huge. They're, I would almost consider, just as big of a project as entire kernels, like operating system kernels. They're about that size in terms of complexity. Because of that, there's a lot of different pieces, and it's difficult to get it right and to know all the different things so that you can create not just a compiler, but an optimized compiler that's designed well, with the languages designed well. So it takes that kind of experience, and that's not something any normal person's going to have. But as you said, using it as a purely academic exercise is amazing because it teaches you how to understand languages and some of their quirks and why they are the way they are. If you can understand that the Lexer stage and then the Parser stage, and then there's many different steps in multi-pass compilers that, like C++ does the preprocessor directives. It goes through all your code and does that. And then it goes through all your code again and does other stuff. And then it goes through all of it again and does optimization steps and all this other stuff. It's really, really cool. And you get to learn a lot.
make a programming language that's just totally built on computer science and engineering quotes that we have in the CSS channel, just like the Arnold Schwarzenegger language. But
yeah, we could totally do something like
I
that.
think that'd be
That'd
a
be
cool
fun.
Friday night coding session thing. Revitalize that. I don't think we've done that in a long time. So, pretty cool. All right, thanks guys for coming today. If you're interested in running for one of the offices, the ACM offices, so far we just have co-chair, chair, and treasurer secretary. We were thinking about maybe having chief software officer as being another role, and chief hardware officer. That way people kind of have a go-to person for either of those roles. We were thinking about adding that. We'll see what happens. We can have the discussion, and then if you're interested in running for any of those roles, send me a message and I will get you on the Google Forms ballot. So, all right.
If I apply for them all and win them all, can I just be?
I don't know if alumni can. I don't know if that's how that works.
I know.
I mean, I know that IEEE can have non-student members. Wait, no, I don't know that.
All right. Thanks, guys, for coming.
I'm mixing it up with
Yeah,
something
thanks
else.
for being willing to listen to me.
No problem.
Thank you for hosting this event thing.
Of course.
Brent.
Appreciate your time. Take care.
Yeah, thank you, bro.